The opinions expressed are those of the host. The material is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute investment advice, and it is not intended as an endorsement for any specific investment. Visit CrestmontPW.com for more details.
Welcome to the Ascent. This is Sam McGee, CEO and owner of Crestmont Private Wealth. We have an office in Houston, Texas at One River Way and one in Bernie at 604 South Main. And today I've got my recurring guest who is an equity partner in Crestmont Private Wealth and our EVP of Financial Planning, Alec Walker. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam. Happy to be here. A lovely, soon-to-be fall morning here in Houston, Texas. We got some cool weather this weekend, but it's starting to heat back up down here.
Yeah, it's the fake fall. It's when everybody goes and grabs sweaters and puts on the I need a pumpkin spice latte, and yeah, it gets hot again. And we remember we're in Texas.
And of course, we know with this fall and what we're going to be talking about a little bit today is kind of the uncertainty specifically in the energy market surrounding layoffs and across many companies in that sector. And it's not something that we're unfamiliar with.
The last time that we dealt with this was back in 2014, 2015, a little bit during COVID, but just a bit of statistics for some of the listeners out there, which many of them are working for energy companies, so they're not unaware of this, but some people are not. Just a few little data points here. ExxonMobil, 2,000 jobs globally, about 3 to 4% of their workforce this year in terms of share of workforce of layoffs. BP, 4,700 jobs, about 3,000 contractor roles, about 5% of the total workforce. ConocoPhillips, up to 25% of the workforce. Fairly large number of people affected by layoffs in a fairly cyclical industry. Obviously, energy is very much driven by supply and demand. There's been a lot of merger activity over the past several years post-COVID, and maybe they're just kind of thinning out some of the workforce as a result of that, but it does impact lives. And Alec, maybe take our listeners through a little bit of how we help a family on the individual level if they happen to work for one of those companies. What does that look like?
So obviously, a very difficult time for someone to be going through a period of uncertainty. Sometimes they may be fortunate to be close to retirement and had been planning on retiring, and the company may be offering some sort of layoff or severance package along with the change in employment, and that kind of gives them just a nice little boost into retirement. And so we're helping navigate the nuances of that, gathering updated financial information, going into our financial planning software and our tools, and running forecasts and models and what ifs and decision scenarios on all the different variables of their plan, making sure, hey, does the plan still work? What is the probability of success of this plan under various circumstances? So looking at a lot of that, as well as, that's kind of the big picture. Let's make sure that we've got the fundamentals taken care of our financial plan, and then really diving down into the details of the financial situation. So we've hosted a couple webinars specifically related to ConocoPhillips layoff and the severance benefit there. So looking at the timing of the severance benefit, the tax implication, when to maybe elect certain benefits to commence for them, managing that client-specific situation. So a very detail-oriented process there on the planning and projection side, and that's not even getting into the investment management side of things.
Sure. And those people that are listening that don't work in the energy industry and have either faced a layoff or may in the future or even worry about it, and what is the one piece of advice that you would give them in terms of kind of a rule of thumb of savings and, just capital available to spend if they lost their job, if they're the breadwinner?
Yeah. The rule of thumb, just by the textbook, is if you're the breadwinner and you're married and your spouse doesn't work, that you want to have about 6 months of emergency savings on hand in cash. Some clients, we always call it the sleep well at night number. That number may be a little bit higher, so that they can feel comfortable about it. But this is, again, another big reason why we are very big proponents of building up that after-tax investment savings bucket as well. So this is kind of saving in addition to what you're normally contributing to your 401k and retirement plans, but also contributing just to a regular brokerage investment account where it kind of becomes your emergency savings bucket part two. You know, let's say we go through a prolonged downturn in your specific industry, that 6-month bucket starts to get low pretty quick. You've got another bucket, another asset that you can pivot to give yourself some time.
You just brought up an interesting dynamic there that I think a lot of people think that investing is only really for the wealthy, those that have just an incredible amount of disposable income. And yes, we do work with wealthy families, typically $1 million and up portfolios. This concept makes sense as a second backstop, you know, even if you're not wealthy, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, you kind of look at it in terms of a percentage of your income or assets. You know, somebody who's wealthy may be contributing, 5% to, an after-tax investment account. Maybe somebody who doesn't earn as much can still do 3 to 5%. It may not be the same in terms of the dollar amount, but you're still able to get money into that investment account to provide an additional backstop if needed. And then hopefully it's not needed and it's there for you in the future.
Yeah. So on that topic of investing and relating to layoffs and severance and maybe an industry downturn, thinking through this from an investment perspective, someone that is investing and maybe in a diversified manner, not in the same industry, not in the same company, that's a prudent move. But how often do you see, Alec, when we come across people that are possibly going to become clients and they're getting a health check on their finances, how many times do you see people investing too heavily in the business where they work, if it's a publicly traded company? What are some of the ways that you and your team counsel people on the plan forward?
Yeah, it is very common to see overconcentration in that specific company or that specific industry stock. It's a little bit biased. You think the industry, you work in the industry, so it gives you a sense of control over that stock or industry that you may have exposure to, when in all actuality, we know that's not the case. Secondarily, there could be some tax consequences that people, maybe they don't sell any kind of restricted stock or company stock that they've been earning over time, and then they look up and they're staring at capital gains if they were to decide to sell that stock, and that makes it a little bit harder. So, what we kind of do in those situations is we really educate clients on the potential tax benefits, the cost of that tax versus the diversification benefits, and putting some numbers behind it, because people would be surprised. You're going to pay that tax at some point. Whether you say, I don't want to do it this year, I'm going to wait 3, 4, 5 years. The marginal benefit of delaying that tax is not much. I mean, we're talking in most cases around a % benefit per year that you earn by waiting to get that tax. And if you think about a company, that 1% that you're earning could be changed on one quarterly earnings phone call. Could go, stock could go 5 or 10% the other direction on one comment and one phone call.
Yeah, it is interesting to see folks that delay selling to avoid tax, but then, let's say that particular security goes up another 20, 30, 40, 50%. Now you just got a bigger tax burden, and then the argument doesn't hold. So, yeah, I think the point of that is get educated on where you're investing. And really, if you think about it, if you're working for a public company and you're over-investing in that particular industry or that company and you get laid off, that may not be a time that particular company or industry is doing very well. Not always the case, but then you've got the double whammy of, my stock might be down and I've lost my job. So another reason to make your money where you work, build your wealth where you work, but then have a diversification plan away from that particular industry or company in a prudent way. And everybody's situation's different. So back to layoffs, and this is really just kind of a topical thing that could be aired in 5 years. It could be about tech companies. It could be about a totally different industry. What are some of the softer sides of this that, counseling on beyond just financial matters? Be sitting in your seat as a financial advisor for Crestmont Private Wealth, what are some of the things that you talk to people about in going through that transition?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in the financial planning role, it seems that we're part financial advisor, part therapist in some situations, just providing that emotional connection, that empathy, which I think is really important. We talk about duty of care, and care is one of our core values. That's so important, and it takes time to build that trust, and that's why we think it's really important for folks to don't go looking for an advisor when you need one.
Kind of like when looking for food when you're hungry, right?
Exactly. Building that relationship and building that trust ahead of time, because we're talking about specifically energy industry right now, but I'm sure we're all hearing things about companies investing heavily in AI and what that could cause as disruption to the workforce across many different industries. We may not know, like you said, we may not know what it looks like in 5 years from now from an employment standpoint anywhere. And so I think it's important to, find a team that you trust and start working with them before you need it, so you could be planning now for today and also for the future, for future uncertainties of what could occur, because we're sitting across the table to provide our experience, and we've been through many of these situations. Like you mentioned, 2015, 2016, going through layoffs. 2020 was a difficult time in the energy industry as well. And so being able to counsel a client who's only going through this for the first time, maybe, to share our kind of experience of working with hundreds of other families going through this and what we've done to generate success during those times.
Yeah, just another tidbit that I would add is whether you're working in energy or you're working in a totally different industry, be sure that you continue to keep your professional network up to date, not just on LinkedIn, but actually go to those opportunities for CE in person instead of sitting behind the screen, the conferences, the things that maybe you don't really want to go to all the time, but go and make connections and continue to build your professional social network, because you just never know when a new opportunity may arise. And that kind of goes part and parcel with continuing to keep your certs and your education up and learning new things. Do hard things, learn new things. And that way, if your number gets called and unfortunately you were to be laid off, you have a network, you're up to speed on industry and other skills, and you've got transportable skills. So hopefully this has resonated with some of you out there that might be worried about layoffs, or maybe a family member who could get laid off, et cetera. At Crestmont Private Wealth, we work with high net worth individuals. Typically, that's $1 million and up portfolio. But we do work with some younger that are high earning, that have the capacity to save and invest for the future. Alec, what is a bit of parting wisdom you would give to maybe somebody who's listening that hasn't built that career resume yet, that was curious about what they could do to stay fresh and relevant to others?
Yeah, kind of touched on a few things there. I do think adaptability is going to be a key. There is, of course, like I said, a lot of uncertainty about how the development of AI. I think I saw a statistic today that companies mentioned AI over 40% higher than a year ago in their earnings calls this past quarter. But, we are optimistic, and I think that AI will augment and not necessarily replace as much of jobs as people think. So I think that's where adaptability and being very broad in your skill set can give you a lot of flexibility and a leg up in the future.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Alec, thank you as always for joining us on the show. Alec Walker, EVP of Financial Planning and Equity Partner with Crestmont Private Wealth, calling in from our Houston office. And if you're listening and you'd like to strike up a conversation with us about a financial review, do a checkup, and you happen to be one of those individuals that fit the mold for Crestmont Private Wealth, please send us an email at info@crestmontpw.com. Have a great weekend, and God bless.